The conversation continues on the Record. I'd like to join to welcome Silvia Foster-Frau, who is the immigration reporter for the San Antonio Express News. Gilbert Garcia is the Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. Thanks for joining us today. Silvia, we talked in the TV portion about the immigrants being dropped off by the Border Patrol at the San Antonio bus station, but the Border Patrol in Eagle Pass reported just this past weekend arresting more than 500 immigrants who had managed to get across the Rio Grande despite the stepped-up presence there. So clearly we have a serious situation in the making, more immigrants on the way. What do you see happening in the next couple of months as far as this volatile situation?
Yeah, well, we have seen larger groups, like migrants are traveling in groups now to try to cross. And one of the possible explanations for the increase in illegal crossing or crossing between ports of entry could be because of the rollout of the metering system that we're seeing at ports of entry, which is, reducing the number of immigrants that get to go through in this legal port of entry process. And so they're choosing to go around. Looking to the future now, possible solutions could include, aiding the Central American countries so that immigrants don't feel the need to make this arduous journey in the first place. The chairman of the Border Security Expo that was here in San Antonio yesterday and today, Tuesday and Wednesday, he said that you can't apprehend your way out of this. That's what he said. And so it's also about looking for alternative solutions too. At some point, you can't just keep arresting and filling up detentions and creating more and more. So what can you do to solve the problem from the beginning,
More of a holistic sort of approach.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier, and I was thinking about, the Central American question and how it's going to play into the presidential race. And former San Antonio Mayor and HUD Secretary Julian Castro, I think about 2 weeks ago, came out with what he called a Marshall Plan idea for Latin America, basically doing what the U.S. did in Europe after World War II and saying, we're just going to try to help rebuild or revive some of these countries so that we won't have there won't be as great a need for people. As Silvia said, you just can't apprehend your way out of it. You're basically dealing with the problem at the tail end of.
Gilbert, you've been writing extensively, as has the Express News, about the race for mayor. We've been talking about the revelations regarding the past of Councilman Brockhouse. We've been talking about how Mayor Nirenberg dealt with the Chick-fil-A controversy. This is really heating up. We've got about a little bit more than a month left before Election Day. Is this just a beginning? Do you anticipate that there'll be more fireworks in the coming 5 weeks?
Yeah, I think there will be. And one thing that we've seen is that, and I don't think this is uncommon for mayoral incumbents, but Mayor Nirenberg is not doing a lot of debates with Greg Brockhouse. They're doing some events separately, but he's doing very few with him. And I think last Friday's radio debate was the first one. And so it felt like there was a lot of tension and hostility that had been building up. Well,
these are clearly two people who don't like each other.
Oh, yeah. No, and he was Mayor Nirenberg was accusing Brockhouse of just scoring cheap political points, and Brockhouse was saying that Nirenberg has really done nothing as mayor, and it felt very personal. I have to say that 2 years ago when Mayor Nirenberg challenged Ivy Taylor, it felt there was some of that too. I think we tend to see this regardless, but these are two people who've been serving together, and I think from the moment that they both got elected, Mayor Nirenberg sensed that Greg Brockhouse was eyeing his job and was going to do everything he could for the next 2 years to make life difficult for him. And so this is what we're seeing is really the culmination of all that tension that's been building up and the pot shots that have been going back and forth.
Silvia, the immigration issue is very all-consuming. It's been talked about on the highest levels of this country for a long time, which is something I haven't seen in the past decades. How do you see this affecting San Antonio? You're writing for the San Antonio Express News. What impact do you think this whole immigration crisis is having on our community?
Well, I think there's definitely more of a sense of connection from the people here to the issue than they would necessarily in other parts of the country, just because, we've had a lot of national lawmakers come down to San Antonio, come down to just 2-3 hours south of here to kind of talk about the issue and, you have local figures like Raíces, which has been thrust into a national spotlight as like a resistance against family separation last year. So I think for the community, they maybe feel more of a sense of responsibility or a sense of authority almost on the border issues, just because of the sheer proximity to it and the kind of nonprofits and organizations that have arisen out of that proximity.
And it does seem like a different issue. I mean, for the last several decades, it's mainly been single men, mainly from Mexico. Now we're seeing the United Nations at our doorstep. Immigration is up from South Asia, it's up from Africa. Obviously, the latest wave is from Central America, and it's families now. And that is a completely different dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of makes you think about immigration differently, and I think it really shows too how much slower our government is to catch up with the shifting demographics. You see the change in immigration patterns, and with the Homeland Security Department like kind of designed to secure the border and manage these populations, I think they're struggling to keep up with these influxes, whether it's, now they're not from Mexico, they're from Central America, so you can't just scoot them over the edge of the border. You have to deport them, put them on planes, have them go through a lot more kind of arduous processes within the United States to get them over there. And then, yeah, you have these small children. Some of them, I was in Laredo like a week or two ago, and that's a place where a lot of immigrants are getting dumped off, and you had mothers with babies, and they're just sitting there waiting for 12 hours until they get their bus. So, and they have nothing, they're penniless, they're hungry, they just got dropped there. And so yeah, I think it really, they talk about the crisis, and it's definitely more of a humanitarian crisis when you have a more vulnerable population. Not only because it's children, but also because these people didn't just hop over from Mexico to the U.S. They made this, as we all know, they've made this really long, arduous journey to get there.
With children as young as 4 months old. That's just an incredible story.
Yeah.
Silvia Foster-Frau is the immigration reporter for the San Antonio Express News. Gilbert Garcia is the Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. Thank you both for joining us on the Record.